So I'm doing the pre-trip for the Ford setup, the Class A. This is also relevant for the Class B folks too as well. But here in the in-cab, the first thing that you're going to look to on your list is the in-vehicle engine start. So you're going to buckle in. So once you're buckled in safely, you're going to point down to the parking brake valve and the trailer brake valve down over here. And you're going to mention that both these valves are engaged. And then before starting the motor up, you're going to turn and point to the end and say that my truck is in neutral. I can start this truck. And then I'm going to look down at these gauges down here and mention to the examiner that I'm in the safe range between 90 and 120. And I'm going to do the air brake check, starting with the governor cutoff switch. So think of the air brake check as the following. So like Gale. So governor cutoff switch, air loss test, low air alarm test, emergency brake test. And you're going to start out with the governor cutoff switch test. I'm going to look over here at the gauges, and I realize that I need to kind of release some air. You don't need to mention that to the examiner, but you just need to release a little bit of air to get the governor cutoff switch to engage again. So I'm going to go ahead and give it some gas here and build up air to the governor cutoff switch. And I'll mention to the examiner that I should hear the governor cutoff switch between 120 and 140 PSI. So I'm sitting here watching the gauges build up to that. I'm not really racing the motor. I heard the governor cutoff switch and it came on right around 130 PSI. So now I'm going to do the air loss test. So to do the air loss test, I'll inform the examiner that I'm going to press and hold the brake pedal. And then I'm going to go ahead and release the valves, both the parking brake and the trailer brake. And then I'm going to turn the truck off and then back into the on position. And I'm holding the brake valves here, and once they settle, I'll mention to the examiner that my air pressure gauges are at about 100 PSI. I shouldn't lose 4 PSI in 1 minute. So I'm going to press and hold the service brake here for 1 full minute. I'll time myself either with my phone or a watch, or I can use this up here too as well, but that's not altogether accurate. And sometimes the examiner next to you will time this for you, but that's rare, not too often. So I'm going to press and hold the service brake or the brake pedal for 1 full minute. When that minute's up, I'll say that it's been a minute now. My gauges are still at 100 PSI. I did not lose 4 PSI in that minute. So now I'm going to go to the low air alarm test, or L. I'm going to pump the brake pedal here, and somewhere before 55 PSI, I'll hear and see the low air alarm. So I'll start pumping. I both hear and see the low air alarm up here at right around 70 PSI. Low air alarm works. So now I'm going to do the emergency brake test. I'm going to continue pumping the brake pedal, and somewhere between 45 and 20 PSI, both my parking brake and trailer brake, or the emergency brakes, those will pop out. My emergency brakes, both the valves here popped out at about 40 PSI. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the truck now and test them. I wanna make sure they're holding. I'll mention that to the examiner. So I'll start the truck up. I'll put it in drive, and I'll just tap the gas pedal here a little bit. Put it back in neutral and say that the emergency brakes hold. So now I'm going to build air up to the safe level. Both the green needle and the red needle, my primary and secondary needles or tanks, they should be somewhere between 90 and 120 PSI, but generally speaking, or typically, it's right around 100 PSI is the safe operating level. So I'll go ahead and build air. So don't be alarmed, it takes a little while. One needle has to get to about 100, 110 or so before the other needle climbs. So I'm going to continue building air until that first hash mark. That's about 100 PSI. Okay, I'll mention to the examiner that I'm now in the safe range between 90 and 120 PSI. Right now, 100 PSI, which is the typical safe level for mini trucks, especially this one. So now I'm going to go ahead and carry on to the parking brake and trailer brake check. But before I do that, I might read this list again and go, did I get everything on the air brake check? I did the governor cutoff switch. I mentioned that where it went off. I did the air loss test. I mentioned where I started from. And then I did the low air alarm. I mentioned where I heard and saw the low air alarms. And then I did the emergency brakes, and then I mentioned where they popped out at. So I'm good to go. So I'll just check that off right now. Right, so now I'm going to do the parking brake and trailer brake check, starting with the parking brake. I'm going to put my truck into drive, and I'm going to release the parking brake. I'm going to pull against the parking brake, and I'll mention to the examiner when I pull against the parking brake, my truck shouldn't move forward. My truck didn't move forward, my parking brake holds. So now I'm going to do the trailer brake. So I'm going to release the parking brake, and I'm going to release or pull out the trailer brake. I'm going to mention to the examiner that the trailer brake should keep my truck from moving forward, but it also tests my trailer connection. So I'll put it in drive now and pull against the trailer a little bit. My truck didn't move forward, my trailer brake holds, and also my trailer is securely connected. So now I'm going to do the service brake. I'm going to release the trailer brake. Now both of these are released or pushed in. And now I'm going to do the service brake or the brake pedal. I'll mention to the examiner that I'm going to pull forward. When I pull forward, my truck should brake evenly. It shouldn't pull to either side. Make sure your wheels are straight, and then pull forward. Service brake works. My truck didn't move side to side. It brakes evenly. So I'll look at this list again, and I've completed both the parking brake and trailer brake. Now I'll move on to this, and then I did the service brake. So now I'll move on to the light indicators, but before I get to that, I'll make sure that I pull these, put my truck into neutral, and start with the light indicators. So starting at the dash, I'm gonna mention to the examiner that I'm looking at the dash right now and I don't see an ABS warning light. I don't see a DEF warning light. The only warning light I see is the parking brake warning light, which tells me that my parking brakes are engaged, and that's correct. And once more, I don't see any other engine warning lights. So now I'm going to get to the directionals, the light indicators here. This right here is my left indicator. I can see it, it's working. And here is the right indicator. I can see it, it's working. There's the high beam indicator. I can see it, it's working. And these are my hazard lights. I can see them, they're working. All my dash lights are working. I can read all my gauges clearly. And that concludes the light indicators. Now I'll move on to the emergency equipment. So first and foremost, I have right behind me there, I have my DOT approved triangles inside that red box. None are missing. I should have 3 of them. They're not broken or cracked. And if you want to say they're the proper color, you can, orange or red. And then the fire extinguisher right there is secured to the floor with that latch. It's not cracked or leaking. The safety pin's in place. Also, that needle's in the green zone, so it tells me it's fully charged. And if you want to say it's proper for your load, you can. And then you have spare fuses. And in this truck, let's pretend that these are my spare fuses. These are my spare fuses. None are missing, none are used. They're all there. So then I'll go ahead and scratch that off. And now I'm going to talk about the windshield and traffic monitoring devices. So right here, my windshield is clean and clear. It's free of cracks or chips. There's nothing blocking my view at all. I can see clearly. There's no illegal stickers. My traffic monitoring devices, or my mirrors, I have mirrors right here. And then I have mirrors on the other side over there. So right there. I'll mention to the examiner that my mirrors are clean and clear. There's nothing blocking my view, and they're all adjusted to me. Then I'll do the wipers and washers. Starting with the wiper blades, I'll point to the blades and I'll say the blades are present, they're tight to the glass, they're not missing, they're not torn or cracked or chipped. And then I'll use the washer fluid here. There's this little button on the side. I'll say the washer fluid is fully charged. It cleans the glass, it doesn't leave streaks. And then I'll do the heater and defrost. So to do the heater and defrost, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this up to full blast air. And then I'm gonna turn this, this can be anywhere, but I'll just, for the sake of demonstration purpose, I'll put it on heat, because it says heater and defrost. And then I'll make sure that this is on heater and defrost guy, like this. All right, and then I'll move my hand up here and I'll say that I feel heat up here. And I also feel heat or air down below, down here. Both my defroster and heater work. And then I'll sound the horns. So in this truck, we just have a city horn. We don't have an air horn, so I'll mention that we have a horn here. City horn works. Most of our other trucks, they'll have an air horn right up here on this panel. You just press it, and you'll say air horn works. So now we're gonna get out and do the all external lights. I'll mention to the examiner that my low beam light here and here works. Now I'm gonna do the running lights. My running lights right here, up on top of the cab. Also right here, right here. back here, over here, down below over there, and up here. Down here, my license plate light works. My running light over here works. My running lights back here, they're all on and working. I can see them. Running light works here, up here, and over here, back there, and up here. All right, so now I'm going to do the high beam lights. My high beam light over here and here, they both work, they're brighter. My left turn signal light works, it's on and working. My left turn signal light over here is on and working. My left turn signal light over here is on and working. And my left turn signal on back here is on and working. Now I'm going to do the right turn signal light. Right turn signal light is on and working. The right turn signal light here is on and working. And the right turn signal light back here is on and working. Also, the right turn signal back here on my trailer is on and working. Now I'm going to do the hazard lights. Hazard lights here and here are working. Also working here on the side. Over here, on and working. Back here on and working. Also back here on and working. Now to do the brake lights, you'll need the examiner's help. So what you'll do is you'll ask the examiner, hey, can you stand back here? And I'm gonna cancel the hazard lights and press the brake pedal. Can you let me know if my brake lights are working on my trailer and my truck? Just give me the thumbs up. They're ready for you to ask that question, but that's the only light that they'll help you with is the brake lights. So I'm going to turn the vehicle off, turn the lights off, and now I can finish up with the rest of the vehicle here on the outside. So right here it says lenses. So what you're doing is you're just talking about the condition of the lenses here and up on top of the cab right there. So that's the front of the vehicle here, so you'll mention those. So the lenses here and on top of the cab, they're all clean and clear, not cracked. None are loose or missing or damaged. They're all the proper color, amber up here, and all securely mounted. So now I'm going to move on to the fluid levels. Release the latches. Make sure it's released there. All right. All right. So when you talk about the fluid levels, you're going to talk about all of the critical fluid levels, such as the power steering fluid. You'll mention to the examiner that I'm going to check the power steering fluid when the engine's running. There's a couple of lines right here. It should be above this min line and below this max line right here. But if it's below the min line here, I'm going to add power steering fluid up here when the engine's running. Now you can mention at this time the cap is tight, it's not loose, not cracked or leaking. And you can also talk about the container. It's not loose, cracked or leaking, no missing nuts or bolts at all. And then talk about the hoses. Or you can save that for fluid and air leaks. Also note that over here, at this gray cap right there, that's where I fill the oil. So now I'm going to move over to the oil. And I'll mention to the examiner that this is where I check the engine oil right here at this yellow dipstick right here. I'm going to check this while the engine's off. I'm going to remove the dipstick, wipe it clean, reinsert it, pull it back out. It should be above the add or the fill line. If it's below the fill line, I'll move to the passenger side or the driver's side over here, excuse me. And here at the cap right there, I'll fill it. The cap is not loose, not cracked or leaking. I'm going to check the coolant level here while the engine's off. It should be above the min line and below the max line. If it's below this min line, it should be above the min line and below the max line. If it's below this min line, I'm going to add coolant up here when the engine's off. The cap's not loose or missing, cracked or leaking. The container's not cracked or leaking. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. You can mention that the container is securely mounted, or like I said, save it for fluid and air leaks. I'll repeat this again. Here's my transmission fluid. I'm going to check that while the engine's running. I'm going to remove the dipstick, wipe it clean, reinsert it, pull it back out. It should be above the fill or the add line. If it's below the fill line with a funnel, I'll add it right here. So I'll look at my list here to make sure I got all my fluid levels, and I have. So I'll scratch it off and move on. So now we're going to talk about fluid and air leaks. I'll mention to the examiner that here at the cap, it's not missing a seal, it's not cracked or leaking. This container here at the coolant, it's not cracked or leaking. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. Also, all the hoses, there's no loose or missing clamps. The hoses themselves, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts at all. The metal line here is not bent, broken, or cracked or leaking at all. I might smell for any burnt plastic or rubber, which might indicate something's loose. I don't want to smell any burnt plastic or burnt fluids. I'm going to make sure that there's nothing leaking here by the radiator, on the top of the radiator, and nothing's puddling or dripping on the ground. And over here, I'm going to make sure there's nothing leaking at the shock right there. There's no air leaks over here by the brake hose at all, or the chamber at all. There's nothing leaking underneath the engine compartment there. There's certainly nothing leaking underneath the transmission at all. I don't want to see any of that. And also, there's nothing leaking or puddling underneath the engine compartment right here, or underneath the radiator at all, or the water pump at all. And nothing's leaking or dripping over here by the shock, by the brake hose here at all. And I don't hear any air leaks because I have air up here and over here. All these clamps are secured and tight. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts in these lines. They're not cracked or leaking. I'll look for leaks right here. There's no loose or missing clamps at all. Here at the power steering fluid is secured right there. The hoses are connected, no loose or missing clamps. They're not bulging, cracked, or leaking at all. The cap's on tight, the seal's in place, it's not cracked or leaking. And that takes care of fluid and air leaks. Now we're gonna go to steering systems. So the steering system, we have a steering shaft right here. We have a steering box right here. We have a pitman arm right here, and we have a drag link right here. So the steering box, you'll mention, it's tight to the frame. It's not sagging or loose. There's no missing nuts or bolts or shiny exposed threads at all. Also, you might look at those holes to make sure there's no out of round holes, which might indicate that it could have been loose. The metal here is not cracked, bent, or dented at all, and the steering box itself is not leaking at all. If I forgot it, I might mention it now. The pitman arm too is not cracked, bent, or dented, or rusted through. There's no missing castle nut or cotter key here. Same with the drag link back there, no missing cotter key or castle nut right there. It's also properly greased at the joints right there. And also over here, up here, and then here at the steering shaft, it's properly greased up here. There's no missing nuts or bolts. That steering shaft is straight, it's not cracked, bent, or dented. And then when I twist that steering shaft by hand, it's tight, it's not loose. There's no more than 10 degrees of play here, or 2 inches at the steering wheel up there. So that takes care of steering systems. So now we're going to talk about the tires and rims and lug nuts and such, the steering axle. So I'm going to talk about this tire right here. I'll mention to the examiner that this tire is a virgin tread. It's not recapped at all. The tread depth is not worn too thin. It's at least 4/32 deep, evenly worn all the way around. There's no thin or square or flat spots. The sidewalls right here and right here, there's no exposed belts or threads at all. There's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. It's not cracked or leaking here at all. I'm going to listen for air leaks all around here and around the seal of the rim there. Also, I'm going to make sure I check the spec, the tire pressure spec up here. And with the tire gauge, I'm going to inspect it here at the valve stem, right here. That valve stem right there is clearly visible. It's not obstructed or hidden at all. The dust cap's in place. It's not cracked or leaking at all. The tires here are securely mounted. And once more, I would say that I'm going to read the spec of the tire to make sure they're properly inflated, not under or over inflated. And I'm going to do that with a tire gauge right here. All right, so the rims right here, I'm going to inspect them inside and out to make sure there's no illegal welds. They're not warped, not cracked, bent, or dented at all. Here at the lug nuts, there's no out of round holes at all. There's no exposed bead or of the tire at all. The rim here is securely mounted. Lug nuts right here and lugs. So I'm going to mention to the examiner, I'm going to inspect the lug nuts and the lugs here. None of the lug nuts and lugs are loose or missing at all, broken or cracked at all. There's no shiny exposed threads at all. There's no gap between the lug nut and the rim at all. And you could say no rust trails, but they don't really want to hear that anymore. They prefer out of round holes, but you would say that about the rim. In this case, you'd say there's no sizable gap. All these lug nuts are tight to the rim, and they're all securely mounted. And then you might have even mentioned that, when you talked about leaks and fluid leaks, you would mention, because here on the automatics, we do have fluid up here in the hub oil seal. You might want to mention that that seal here by the hub is not leaking at all either. I didn't mention that for my fluid and air leaks, but that might be worth mentioning. So I just took care of the tires, rims, and lug nuts. Now I'm gonna go to spring mounts, airbags, and shocks. You'll mention to the examiner that we don't have airbags up here on the steer axle. We just have springs and shocks. So I have a spring mount right there. It holds the spring right here to the body of the truck. And I also have a spring mount. Let's follow that spring all the way to the back, that spring mount back there. It's tight to the truck. I'll mention that the spring mounts, they're not sagging or loose or twisted or bent. They're not rusted through at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all, or shiny exposed threads at all. Same up here, it's not cracked, bent, or dented, or rusted through at all. It's tight to the frame, it's not twisted, sagging, or bent at all. Right up here, there's these springs right here, there's two of them. They're not scissoring one another, they're directly on top of one another. They're not cracked, bent, or dented, or rusted through at all. And here, they're held to the axle right there with these U-bolts. I have two U-bolts right there. They're not cracked, bent, or dented at all. Down below, there's no missing nuts or shiny exposed threads at all. And then I have the shock right here. The shock is this right here. The shock is straight. It's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. Also, there's these bushings on the top up here and also down below there. Down below there. They're not worn through, torn, cracked, loosed, or missing at all. The shock, too, is straight. It's not cracked, bent, or dented, or leaking at all. And the bracket right here is tight to the frame. It's not twisted, sagging, or loose at all. The shock right here is securely mounted. Okay, so that takes care of spring mounts, and shocks. So now we're gonna move on to the brake lines and hose and leaks. So right here, I have the brake hose right here. It's connected up here and also up to the supply right here. This brake hose, it's not loose at all. These connectors are tight. They're not twisted or loose at all or leaking at all up here or up here. I'd listen for air leaks here and especially up there. This hose too is not, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. It's not weathered through, cracked, or leaking at all. And we have this ABS line that's tied up below the brake hose right here. It goes all the way up here, down to the sensor, down by the tire down here. So you mentioned that the ABS line too is securely tied up. It's not loose. There's no cut or exposed or loose wires at all. The ABS line and brake hose here are securely mounted. And you might want to also mention that you're going to listen for air leaks down there too as well, if I hadn't. And the thing is that it's okay to repeat yourself. Speak up loud. If you say it once, that's great. If you say it twice, maybe they'll get it the second time if they missed it the first time. So now we're going to do brake contaminants. So the brake contaminants, what they want you to do is they're going to have you look right here, and you're going to say, with a flashlight, I'm going to look inside this inspection hole. I want to make sure that it's dry inside, clean and dry inside the brake drum. There's no oil or grease or excessive debris or any sign of brake fade or overheating at all, because any of that could lead to brake failure, and I don't want that. All right. So I just finished brake contaminants now. Now we can do the side of the vehicle. So I'm gonna close the latch right here, the hood. Also lock it. Now I'm going to do the side of the vehicle. So side of the vehicle, lenses and reflectors. So I'm going to point to this lens right here and this one right here, and also to the reflector back here. And then all of the lenses and reflectors on the side of the trailer all alongside there. And I'm going to mention to the examiner that they're all clean and clear, not cracked at all. None of them are loose or missing. They're all securely mounted. And they're the proper color up here, which is amber, and the proper color back there, which is red. So traffic monitoring devices are really these mirrors right here. So you mentioned to the examiner that the housing and this arm right here is securely mounted to the truck. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. It's not sagging or loose at all. The plastic and the metal is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. And the glass right here of the mirrors, they're clean and clear, not cracked. None of them are loose or missing, securely mounted. Now we'll do the battery, which is here on the passenger side. My battery's inside of here. The battery box is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. It's not twisted, sagging, or loose at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. It's not rusted through at all. It's also tight to the body of the truck. It's not sagging down here at all or twisted at all. I'm going to remove this cap and inspect the two batteries inside there. The batteries are secured inside with those straps. The straps are not loose or missing at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. The batteries themselves are not bulging, cracked, or leaking at all. And also the electrical lines are connected. They're not loose. There's no corroded, exposed, or loose wires at all. The batteries in the box are securely mounted. Fuel tank and def tank now. This is my fuel tank, and the def tank is right here. Starting with the fuel tank, it's securely mounted with these two metal straps right here. You need to have at least two, and this one does. They're not loose or missing at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts down there or down there. The tank itself is tight to the truck. It's not sagging anywhere or loose anywhere at all. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. The tank itself is not cracked, dent, or leaking at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all here. No broken or missing welds right here and around the cap right here at all. I'm going to mention that these hoses are connected inside here. They're tight to the tank up here. They're not loose. There's no abrasions, bulges, cuts, not cracked or leaking. That electrical sensor and pump line right there is connected. It's not loose, no corroded, exposed, or loose wires at all. I have nothing leaking on the top of the tank here, around the cap here at all, or nothing's leaking or dripping on the ground at all. This cap is on there tight. I would loosen that cap to make sure the gas cap seal's in place. It's not missing at all. And also the safety chain is there. The tank is securely mounted. The def tank too is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. It's not leaking at all. The seal, I would check that to make sure the seal around the def tank is there in place, or around the cap is in place. It's not missing at all. The safety chain is there. The metal bracket too is tight to the truck. It's not sagging or loose at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. And also these hoses, there's no abrasions, bulges, cuts, not cracked or leaking at all. And those electrical lines too are plugged in. They're not disconnected at all. There's no corroded, exposed, or loose wires at all. The def tank here is securely mounted. And if I thought I missed it, I might also mention that there's nothing leaking on the ground below the def tank either. Next is frames. When you talk about the frame of your Class A setup, you're going to mention the frame of the truck and also the trailer right there. So the frame of the truck, it's nice and even with the ground. It's not twisted or sagging or bent anywhere at all. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented or rusted through at all, anywhere at all. All these cross members are in place. They're all straight. They're not twisted or sagging at all. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. All the cross members are securely mounted. I'm going to inspect the metal both inside and out to make sure there's no illegal welds or no rust holes at all. I don't want to see any of that. And then I'm going to move on to the frame of the trailer. The trailer there's nice and level with the ground. It's not twisted or sagging anywhere at all. There's enough height for the road right here. There's enough clearance between the apron here and the trailer right there for turns. Also, the metal's not cracked, bent, or dented. There's no broken or missing welds at all. There's these tie-down straps or rings right there, the D-rings there. None of them are loose or missing at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all. All the ramps here and here, they're upright in the drive position. They're not loose at all or dragging at all. And all these deck boards are in place too as well. None of them are missing. There's no missing screws at all. And then I would mention that I would climb underneath the trailer there to make sure that all his cross members are securely mounted underneath there. There's no broken or missing welds at all. None of them are bent or like I said, missing at all. None of them are hanging on the ground at all. They're all securely mounted and strong enough for my cargo. So scratch that off. So that takes care of frames. So now we'll do combination vehicle, air and electrics. So, and the connectors. So you're gonna mention that here at the glad hands, I have red to red and blue to blue. Also, they're right locked in the dry position right here. They're not twisted or loose at all. The rubber seal between here and here is in place. There's no dirt or debris stuck in between them. The seals, they're not torn or cracked at all. They're not leaking. I'm gonna listen for air leaks here and right here. Where the hose meets the glad hand here, the connectors are tight. They're not loose or leaking at all. And the hose right here, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. It's not cracked or leaking at all. And also right here, there's nothing loose or cracked or leaking at all. And it might also be worth mentioning all the lines and hoses that are secured to the inside of the truck here. You don't want none of those hanging below the truck to get caught up on anything. You want to make sure that all these connectors are tight. They're not loose, they're not cracked or leaking. The hoses there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're not cracked or leaking at all. All the electrical lines are plugged in and tied up. They're not going to get disconnected at all. And then you'll mention the electrical line right here. The plug-in's plugged in right here. And also, there's a plug that comes in this way in this setup. This one's got an electrical setup, but let's pretend that's right there. It's connected right here with a safety latch right there. That safety latch is not missing at all. It's connected, and then you're gonna grab all the hoses and lines here and kind of go like this. It's actually here, the electrical line's on this side, excuse me. So the electrical line is plugged in here with the safety latch. This latch is right here. It locks in place. The bracket too is mounted to the frame. It's plugged in right here. It's not disconnected at all. There's no cut or exposed wires at all. The electrical line and air lines up here in the front are all securely mounted, and there's also enough slack for turns, but not so much slack that they're gonna get caught up in anything. And then you're gonna go back here on your trailer, kind of do the same thing. Talk about the hoses and the lines and the connection points. So up here, you're gonna talk about the connection points up here. And then sometimes there's a connection point up here, or in this case right here and right here. And then, so starting with the connection points, you'll mention that they're not loose at all. They're all tight. They're not cracked or leaking at all. Listen for leaks there. The hoses here, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're not cracked or leaking at all right here. Here are its connection points. They're tight. They're not loose at all, cracked or leaking. Here it's filter locations right too. They're tight to the frame. They're not cracked, bent, or dented, or loose at all, or leaking at all. The air hoses here, and also this electrical line here, they're all securely tied up to the trailer. They're not dangling here loose. With the electrical line right here is plugged in. It's also locked. It's not going to come loose. There's no corroded, exposed, or loose wires here on the electrical line. The electrical line and air hoses here are securely mounted. So now we're going to do the fifth wheel skid plate. So the fifth wheel skid plate, you're going to mention the fifth wheel skid plate right here is mounted to the truck with this platform right here and also the bracket right here. The platform and the bracket, they're tight to the frame. They're not twisted, sagging, or loose. There's no sizable gap between the platform and the frame at all, or this bracket and the frame at all. The metal too is not rusted through anywhere at all. There's no large rust holes at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all. The metal too is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. There's no loose or missing mounting bolts up on top of here or down below there at all. You'd also point to the ones that are inside here. There's no loose or missing mounting bolts on the inside there. Also over here. And you mentioned those over here. So you mentioned that the brackets, once more, are tight to the frame. There's no loose or missing mounting bolts at all. And then you go up to the fifth wheel skid plate. You'll mention that the fifth wheel skid plate's nice and level. You know, the pin and cotter key are in place right there. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all, or rusted through anywhere at all. And we don't grease the top of our skid plate. In its place, we have this poly plate right here. The poly plate's in place. It's clearly visible. I can see it. It's not worn through or missing at all. The fifth wheel skid plate is securely mounted. So now we'll go to kingpin, apron, and leaks. So inside here there is an apron inside here, or I'm sorry, there's a kingpin inside here. The kingpin right here is straight. It's not crack bent or dented at all. Also, the head of the kingpin is below the locking jaw right there. The head of the kingpin is not missing at all or sheared off at all. The kingpin right here is securely mounted. The apron right here is straight. It's not crack bent or dented. There's no broken or missing welds at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts or shiny exposed threads at all. It's also not rusted through at all. The apron is securely mounted. Now the gap, I'm going to mention to the examiner that I don't want to see a gap between the apron right up here and the skid plate right here. A sizable gap, like maybe the size or greater than the size of this locking jaw right here. If I saw daylight or a gap, that would mean that my trailer is not securely connected or there's something wrong back here. I want to make sure that the locking jaw is around the neck of the kingpin where it should be, that there's no sizable gap or daylight right here. My trailer is securely connected. So that takes care of that. Now we're going to go to locking devices. So the locking devices, you have this locking jaw right here. The locking jaw is straight. It's clearly visible. Right now it's locked in the dry position. If it were not, the kingpin would be exposed and that would be bad. So right now it's locked in the dry position. The metal's not crack bent or dented. I'm going to look inside there with the flashlight to make sure that it's clearly seated around the neck of the kingpin. There's no sizable gap. Say for accidentally for that head of the kingpin to pop through. You know, it's rare, but it could happen, so you want to check that too as well. The locking jaw is securely mounted. And then over here, you'll mention that this right here is my release arm. My release arm doesn't have a safety latch right here. I'll demonstrate. It doesn't have a safety latch that locks this in place. In its place, we have spring tension. That spring is not missing at all. Also, if it were, this thing would fall out this way, be way out here. Right now it's locked in the dry position, which is great. It's held there tight. The metal's not crack bent or dented. It's securely mounted. Scratch that off and then move on to the landing gear and clearance. First thing you want to mention that I have enough clearance between the front of the trailer and the landing gear here, and also the back of the truck, and also the fifth wheel right here. This is a gooseneck style trailer, so I have plenty of clearance for turns on the road, which is great. The landing gear is not too close to the truck or the fifth wheel or anything. Also, the fifth wheel foot right here is not dragging on the ground at all. Right now it's locked tight in the dry position right here. There's plenty of clearance for the road. This thing's not gonna get caught up in anything. Also, the spring right here on this pin is locked in place. If the spring weren't present, this would fall out and my foot would fall on the ground here. I don't want that. Also, there's no rocks or debris or ice at all. You know, if I had to quickly drop this trailer, I could safely do that. Right now, there's no missing nuts or bolts at all. The metal here is not crack bent or dented at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts here at all. It's properly greased up here. And the handle itself is stowed away right here in the dry position. The landing gear is securely mounted. And there's also plenty of clearance for the road and my truck. Now we're gonna do trailer only reflective tape. So we have DOT approved tape on the front of my trailer here. We have DOT approved tape on the side of my trailer right here. It's all adhered to the trailer. It's not obstructed. It's also clean and clear. And it's also DOT approved. Also the proper color. You can say that too as well. And it's all securely mounted. So the rear of the trailer, lenses and reflectors. Right here, you're gonna point to the lenses back here. You'll mention that the lenses are all clean and clear, not cracked. None of them are loose or missing at all. The reflectors too, are the reflectors inside the brake lights there, and also this DOT approved tape down here. And on the wheel wells there, and the DOT approved tape back there. You'll mention that all the reflectors are clean and clear, not obstructed, all securely mounted. And you have the proper color back here, which is red. And that kind of concludes the pre-trip. So that's from start to finish. I'll kind of point out, you know, you didn't get a chance to see the lenses and reflectors on this side right here, but you'll mention the lenses right here. Also, pay special note to this ABS light right here. You'll mention that if that ABS light were on, I don't have ABS back on my trailer, but I do have normal braking. I'll get my trailer serviced as soon as possible. When you talk about the side of the truck, because you have a trailer, don't forget to talk about the lenses too as well. You got to mention all the lenses. There, and there. Mention that they're all clean and clear, not cracked, none of them are loose or missing, have the proper color in front, which is amber, and the proper color in the back, which is red. That kind of concludes everything. Like I said, this is not timed, so there's no need to rush it. Just be thorough. Try to avoid using terms like in good condition, or it looks good, or it's okay, because none of that means anything. You really got to describe what good is and what good condition is. And that's it.